Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is S.Y. Lim, and I'm the Director of Programming and Community at MANA Contemporary Chicago, and we're very excited to host our Community Talks with Rodrigo Lara today. Community Talks, presented in partnership with Monira Foundation, is an ongoing tradition at MANA Contemporary Chicago where artists convene to catch up, meet colleagues, and exchange ideas. MANA Contemporary Chicago, in collaboration with Monira Foundation, invites curators, writers, directors, and gallerists for this program. This event is free and open to the public. Today, I'm very excited to introduce Rodrigo Lara to have a lecture and a conversation about his practice and his current exhibition, Convictions, which is located on the 8th floor of MANA Contemporary Chicago. Please welcome Rodrigo, everyone.
Thank you, that's why. Yeah, it's great to see you guys. Really, it's been a long time for some faces, former students, current students, for people we never met in person, no? So it's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invite. And yeah, I'll make a different version of a presentation that I usually do so that it connects and leads to the show upstairs and the reasons of why I chose this artist to be part of this exhibition. No? As you were looking at that image, I grew up very Catholic, no? Probably as some of you. There weren't many pictures of me like as an altar boy, but I'm actually the one in the middle and my two brothers. So I was very excited to become one like a few weeks after that picture was taken. So that's the rest of the altar boys. There's a sixth one on the other side of the camera who actually ended up being a photographer as a living. So during the day we were altar boys, but at night we will vandalize the neighborhood. Of kids' kids' houses like kids who were mean to other kids. So we're like, I don't know, helping without the neighborhood. I also was oftentimes chosen as Jesus' father, no, as Joseph, either in school or family things. So like extremely Catholic, no. So the altar boys, we had our headquarters, which was in the municipal cemetery. So if you know other shows or pieces I have put together, oftentimes references commemoration, no, and thinking of dead saints or regular people. So this is the hometown where my grandfather and my father were born. It's called La Paz, San Luis Potosí. And I would hear a lot of stories from my grandfather. One of them was that they built that house with their hands, no, like adobe bricks, but they actually built brick by brick. No? So I was amazed that this whole town was made out of clay and basically by hands. No? So I really love that story. This is the town where I went to undergrad. It's called San Miguel de Allende. It's right in the middle of the country. A tiny program, that's the whole school, master's and undergrad. That's kind of the work I was doing. At the end of that, I was really focused into learning anatomy. You know, I was teaching there for a year after my program, and I was also into music. Also, my parents couldn't find any pictures, but I also played drums in the church at the Sunday mass at noon. But really, what I liked best was like playing punk rock, indie pop kind of thing. No? So oftentimes you will see that also in my practice, like drum sets or cymbals, drums, cowbells, and so on. No? So the way I try to think of sculpting or leaving gestures in the clay, mimics those kind of gestures, like pretty rapid and sudden or subtle and slow. Same thing with the painting. I like to think of these gestures. Or even while working, like setting up several pieces around me, sort of mimicking that idea of playing a drum set. So this was a project I did in grad school. I'm mentioning this in connection to performance. So my first year of grad school, I did this project. in which I was trafficking clay powder in suspicious packages, of course mimicking drugs being brought into the US. No? So I did this performance 2 times, bringing 10 kilos of clay from Zacatecas state, but pretty violent state. I will hide these lumps of clay inside of sculptures. And of course, the poetics of the material was very important to me. So I ended up mixing this clay with clay from the US. I was interested in the idea of the connection between the drug war in Mexico, between Mexico and the US. Of course, Mexico provides the drugs, US consumes and sells them. And so I was replicating dismembered body parts that oftentimes are found in public spaces in Mexico. So either like life-size pieces like this, and the whole installation ended up growing up into larger pieces, like either life-size or larger than life-size, displaying it in different forms and spaces. So this was my MFA show, and still like ideas of religion came back, like altar boys, things like that. And then thinking of histories or stories happening on both sides of the border. I had this solo exhibition at the National Museum of Mexican Art, the Portable Aliens, in which I was referencing the 1930s repatriation program, in which Hoover and Roosevelt repatriated or deported about 1 million Mexicans, but not just Mexicans, also people from South America, Europe, Asia. But the Mexicans were the highest numbers, easier to target. We tend to go to similar or specific stores to buy our food, or live in specific neighborhoods, or just by the looks. The U.S. thought we should be kicked out. However, 60% of those people repatriated or deported were U.S. citizens. They were people who were, many of them never been in Mexico or even spoke Spanish. So I made this exhibition back then, thinking of the thumbprint, this idea of individuality, by the marks put into documents, right? So these are all portraits of immigrants that at the time at least were living in the US. Some of them already left. And I was thinking about those proportions, like about mostly were Mexicans, but also South Americans, Europeans, Asians. And so these pieces, again, are either partial portraits, either life-size or larger than life-size, So thinking of monumental sculpture, usually it's thought about it as anything that is life-size or larger than life-size. So these are porcelain sculptures. Now these 3 are part of the permanent collection of the National Museum of Mexican Art. So other series also happened between these pieces. 2016 was the first Chicago Architecture Biennial, and this piece was shown at 6018 North, and other versions of this show also happened around the city, including the Pole Art Museum. So the piece is called Chapel. In this case, what I was doing was referencing different artists, like Michelangelo, Carpo, and changing the busts of the saints and putting faces of dead artists. So it's like a chapel, like how I'm comparing and contrasting religion, Catholicism, with contemporary art. How similar sometimes our beliefs are, being in our studio, like it's really about faith, believing in ourselves or hoping that somebody will believe in ourselves, and especially in the afterlife. So during a residency at ACRE, I had people voting for their favorite artists or artists people will reference in their practice. Similarly, how in Catholicism, sometimes the day you are born, that's the name you get after the saint of that day, right? Or just referencing saints on your everyday life, praying to specific people. I feel like in our studio we reference different artists, thinking of references in our materials and concepts and forms, So on the other side, I sculpted this body, the bodies of different living artists. I was thinking of, since I was a kid, during altar boy times and all that, when people would tell me like, well, these sculptures are after saints, right? I will think, well, if heaven is up there, in my head I imagined that people were walking up backwards, so they will look up like we will look up, like a mirror. So I was like, if dead people are set up upside down for heaven, so living people should be set up for them, So different artists pose after choosing poses from this different artists I was mentioning. And yeah, so thinking of how our practice or the head of these missing bodies, like at the end, like sort of our goal as artists is like be remembered on the afterlife. So again, these are all porcelain pieces. And then now I'm gonna show you the exhibition upstairs is about. So during the pandemic, I started this performance piece in which I'm referencing my grandfather, the same guy I was talking earlier, building the house with Adobe. And so my grandfather was an artist, so it was like the first influence I ever had as a maker. In the town where he was born, again, La Paz, there wasn't further education than third grade, but his adoptive father encouraged him to study drawing, painting, how to play the violin. And so seeing these pieces at his house, like replicas, oftentimes replicas of religious pieces really changed my perception or interest in looking at details of pieces. So for instance, 2 out of his 5 kids were priests. So you can imagine how religious, not just my family, basically the whole country tends to be. So yeah, that's a picture of him with his professor. I think he was like 12 years old in there. Here he was like 80, and he was still like volunteering for church to either make pieces or copy paintings, to like paint the back for the theater, or plays, nativities, etc. In this case, he was doing restoration work for that sculpture. And so basically that portrait is the one that really changed my life, like just looking at it really close and so thinking like how a burned piece of wood, like charcoal, of course, was going to be able to make this kind of drawing. So this drawing is almost 100 years old. And so even though my grandfather learned these techniques and could do art, let's say, he never make work as a living. He had different jobs during his life. For 12 years, he was a taxi driver. And so between 1926 to 1929, there was a war in Mexico named the Cristero War, in which the president at the time wanted to get rid of Catholicism, which was, by the way, the only religion allowed at the time. So the president thought that because of the power of the priests, they would tell people who they should vote for. And so the government really didn't like that, even though the government does exactly the same, or especially the present president, let's say. But anyway, so about 250,000 people were killed in this particular period of time, mainly on the central part of Mexico, a little bit west as well. And so it wasn't only the Catholics, no? It was also the military members, no? So it was like a war back and forth, no? All the time. So these are images from either people, of course, being killed or priests, and these mass services that were happening just in the woods, no? Like where they thought they wouldn't be captured or killed. And so my grandfather was not part of the armed conflict, but he did use his taxi, his cab, no, as a tool to support the Catholics, no. So he would use his vehicle in order to transport priests between their hiding locations to underground mass services, no, either to marry people, to baptize kids, just every day, not every day, but let's probably every Sunday mass, no? So of course, risking his life and anybody's lives who was in the car. So I started this performance in which I sculpted again in porcelain a partial portrait of my grandfather and wearing similar clothes as what he would wear at the time. No? So you can see the car I use in the back here. The car is not important. It's more about the action, right? And what would happen during this performance work. And so the piece, it's a utilitarian sculpture, no? It's also an exhibition space. So not every single ride, but many of them I actually brought pieces, one piece at a time, so that people... Sorry, that's my baby. But yeah, so basically it was a solo exhibition of people, one piece at a time. In this case, the piece was not activated. People will just get into an Uber and Lyft. So not thinking of a taxi in these days, but the regular platforms or I guess more common platforms for people. I started using this vehicle to approach to viewers. No, of course, during the pandemic, we didn't have access to our studios or studio visits, but also, I mean, theater or in order to go see or hear music, no, performances, exhibition spaces, museums, galleries, etc. No, so I was thinking how my grandfather would assist religion in his own way. So I thought I will do something, since my belief is about art, not as much as Catholicism. So instead of giving free rides to priests, whoever activated the piece, I will explain in a moment. So most of the trips, people couldn't really tell that it was an exhibition. I did not have the partial portrait in my face or on top of the regulatory mask for COVID. I just had the mask, no? So whoever activated the piece, then I told them the story about my grandfather, and then take it from under the seat and then wear it, no? And so I told people, instead of giving free rides to priests or believers of God, let's say, I will give them free art catalogs, no? So either people chose, or after conversations we had during the ride, no? I would suggest different mediums, no, painting, sculpture, photography, so that people sort of will engage better with the work, no. So different museums donated a lot of catalogs after I had a bunch of rides already made. At the beginning, I was buying the catalogs, no, spending money or circulating the money from the platform that I was making, no, or tips or whatever, no. So it'll always go back into it. So you can see here the different platforms. I will take all rides. No, for me it was important to have a vehicle that I could have users from the basic, like the Uber X or Lyft basic, no, to XL, luxury, black and black XL, no, and the regular XL if I missed. But anyway, so the piece was available for any user of the platforms, but also the whole Chicagoland area, no? So now people are allowed to see where the ride is going, But back then you couldn't see that. So you can see I took all 100% any rider, no cancellations. I was lucky people gave me good stars, no. There were a lot more rides than this, but at this time I took the screenshots. It was over 1,000. And even people would leave comments like that. So I put that not just because I'm proud I was trying to be a good driver, but but also that the piece was also so fragile that anybody approaching the platforms would have said like, this guy's doing this, no? So it's completely illegal. The same way it was illegal to transport clay from Mexico, no? But the show, the exhibition, or the performance piece was never canceled, no? So I was lucky about that. And so from this work, I started making some pieces, no? Upstairs you will see a version of this mannequin, no? So the clothes I will wear during the performance, the hat, no? So that's another picture of my grandfather. I think he was like 86 or so when he was still painting. So that I started also taking pictures of the vehicle in different parts of the city, no? Of course, since we live here, we could recognize areas or different times of the year, no? Of course, I did Photoshop there. But so thinking of this idea of like if my grandfather was here, no? So I made a few versions of the masks. I sculpted the original and then made a mold, casted a few copies either with glaze or just the pure porcelain. And so I made it really, really thin, no? So it's not super heavy, but I can still wear it, take it on and off, no? So it's a wearable sculpture. I also started making these paintings, but they're more like triptychs. During a residency at Mass MoCA, I was making most of them, like the triptych upstairs. It's referencing the city tickets, no? So every time you cross a red light or a speeding ticket, they send you home a piece of paper, no? Showing you like before you commit the crime, and then a close-up of it. So I thought, well, at the beginning my wife was a little mad at me, but then I was like, this is work, no? Basically the city is taking portraits of my project, no? So I was making portraits of those portraits, and I didn't alter much. I just didn't put any letters or times of this incidents, but instead I put the plate number of my grandfather's cab, which is not mine, obviously, 0004. Imagine how early he started being a cab driver, but also the size of the town was like very, very small. So it was, of course, very hard time for everybody, like not being able to see people or family. In my case, not being able to go to my country. But I was in contact a lot with my father, no? Like asking him to find pictures of the time, no? So he was like scanning images, right? So we figured out that one of those priests is this guy standing right here. So he was also best friends with my grandfather, no? It wasn't just the Catholic part. He was also really close to this person. So again, you can see a little close-up of the plate. So these are some images in progress, no? So all of them, again, the only thing I changed was the plate of the car. So another part of the project, once I was able to go to Mexico, I decided to visit or try to put my body and then the mask in the places where the pictures we found of my grandfather were taken, no? But again, almost 100 years later. So this is the area of La Paz. Real de 14 is really close. Maybe you have heard it because of movies, no? Hollywood really likes that area and the town itself. So that's where the other picture was taken, where the four guys, no? This was the hardest to find because some of the other images were taken right outside of my father's house. The image I showed you at the beginning, we'll go back to that. So it was really easy just to place myself in that specific area. But finding this tiny highway, and the mountains was really like hunting, no? Because we will go to towns in the area and like show them a picture, no? And people are afraid, like what are you doing here, no? Like they know everybody who lived there, and we're like, my grandfather was a taxi driver, like I'm trying to find this place. So it took us a couple of days to find, and several phone calls to my father's cousins and relatives that still live in the area, no? So they were trying to sort of guide us to where to go before actually taking the whole trip, no? So I was replicating, again, these images that we're taking with my grandfather and his taxi. Again, the project is not about a car, but it's about placing myself in these particular places, no? On the other hand, I tried I actually found cars from the same years and the brands that my grandfather had as taxis, no? Again, it didn't matter about what car it was, but at least getting closer, no? Cars that were in the same state in Mexico and they had been there all these years, no? And so I'm gonna go pretty quick here because we still have the show upstairs on the 8th floor, and I would love you to see it. So besides the car acting as a performance space and as a functional sculpture, a art library, also I wanted to connect not just people from locations A to B, but also connecting artists, no, in both sides of the country. So the 10 artists I invited or I curated for the show are artists who run non-traditional spaces and that either have been curating exhibitions, right, or displaying other artists' work that sometimes we don't think of their work itself, but more what they do. So it's also people who either in the past, present, or future have these exhibition spaces, no? So my invite is for you guys or whoever came to see the show, how these different artists will look at the work or use the materials. Some of the topics could be related to religion as well. But yeah, so these exhibition spaces are either in Milwaukee, Chicago, Las Vegas, Mexico City, San Miguel de Allende. Yeah, thank you guys. Yes?
Can you talk about curating the exhibition a little bit more about, I mean, I know you as an artist, not as a curator. So I'm really curious about what that experience was, especially since all the products you talk about have like a real, you can draw a line through them. And then you're like, okay, here's an exhibition. So I really want to know like what that experience was talking to the folks you were working with and building that project, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. Yeah, well, the project did grow like very organically, you know, so it was not everything resolved from the very beginning. I never thought I will make it for 2.5 years, no? None of us thought that pandemic was gonna be, I mean, the war in Mexico, I told you, was 3 years long, and I was like, I don't think it's gonna be that long, but I mean, we still don't even know if it's over, no? But anyway, so some of the early pieces I was showing were just things I had either available, like to borrow, but I wasn't even thinking like, oh, there has to be artists who run other exhibition spaces, no? Like those conversations would start with the writers, though, and like it was really like listening and thinking of different interests of people, and basically it's SY's fault. I mean, I have curated a couple of shows, no, like teaching or leading a critique seminar in Hyde Park Art Center, ended up with an exhibition, so I curated a show there. It's called the Bridge Program, and a couple of other little things, no? I don't want to insult real curators like yourself. It's, I mean, not insult really, but you know, it makes me excited, no? Like seeing group exhibitions and the conversations that probably don't even exist, but a curator is able to sort of see and wave around different interests, materials, forms. But yeah, one of the couple of grants of support I got was from Hyde Park Art Center, and SY was part of the jury. And so she told me, like, have you ever shown like artists in your project together? And I was like, no. And she was like, would you be interested of doing that? And I was like, that'll be fantastic, no? Because some of these pieces were never together at the same time, no? So I thought it was a great idea, no? So I don't know if that answers your question a little bit. Thank you, guys.